Hey everyone, I am back with another video, and pardon the delay since the last video. I started a new job about 3 weeks ago and just been getting settled in with some other adjustments in my life. And I'm also have the ongoing headaches that I'm battling. So those are the reasons for the delay. But I will try to do a better job at posting more frequently, especially to finish up this series here, which I did not mention in this video. Um, so in the last video, we went through how to set up Lucia version 3 with SvelteKit, and I showcased how to register a user, log in with that user, and also be able to view some of that user's information in the dashboard once they are logged in. So in this video, I am going to be walking through on how to set up email verification. Now, the reason why this is important is to be able to prevent users from registering with a fake or incorrect email address. Well, actually, they will still be able to register, but we don't want to keep them in our database unless the email is verified. So we would want to go through our database and remove any users that have not been verified for whatever the duration that you feel is reasonable is. And with now, once we know that the user has a valid email, we would be able to do different things, such as if they ever want to reset their password, we would be able to send them a password reset link to that valid email. And I'm actually going to be making a video on how to do a password reset with Lucia Auth once I am done with this video. So be on the lookout for that. And the other thing too, with a valid email, if we ever want to send the user information such as updates we made to the website or a service that we're promoting, we would be able to do so. So that is that. And I just want to go to the repo real quick. I made some updates to the main branch. The main branch is the branch that we worked on in the last video. And in this video, I made a email verification branch that we're going to be walking through. That's how I'm going to kind of segment things for this series through the branches. And once I have the password reset in place, I'm going to create a branch for that as well. And I'll also update the README to include all that information. So, with that, I just want to showcase quickly what happens if we register with a fake email address. We would be able to just go right through to the dashboard and we don't even know if this is real or not. So we are going to work on getting that verification in place. So with that, let us begin. All right, so right now we have the email verification branch running and just wanted to show you how that would look like with the email verification process for the end user. We're using Resend to send the email verification codes. So with that, I'm using I guess, a test version of Resend right now, and I am only able to send emails to the email that I registered with. So that's why I'm using my actual email. So please don't spam me. And then I'm just going to click submit to register. Oh, actually, I already registered. Let me just quickly actually delete that from the database because that's not supposed to be. Let me boom and then pndb push and let's reload again. Get that. Let me actually also delete anything that might be there, any cookies. So that's awesome. We go back to lay mode and let's try this again. So I'm going to register and then we get sent to this new route called email verifications. And it just tells us that, hey, we've sent the verification code to your email. So on this page, we're going to be able to enter that verification code and verify. And then once we do verify, it brings us to the dashboard page as a valid user. And we, for that verification code, we also currently set it to expire within 5 minutes. So if that does happen, they could always go back to this page and request a new verification code. So let's just grab that verification code right here and we enter it and boom, we are logged in. So that is dot. Also, the steps that we're going to be going through on how to set this up, you can view it on Lucia's website. So on the main page, you just go under guides, you go to email and password, and you click email verification codes. So it gives you some info of what we're going to be going through. We're going to be creating a new email verification code table, and then we're going to create a function to generate the verification code. This is the another function to generate the code itself, and the different steps when you're like signing up, etc. So we're going to walk through this in this repository I have set up. Let me actually just close out some stuff. To get this working, the first thing we're going to do is to update the schema. So let me just close this down and go from here. So again, a disclaimer for anybody that's viewing my videos for the first time. I already went through the setup for these different tables, except for the email verification ones and the last video. So please check that out for more context of what's going on. But yeah, the only thing we're adding new to the users table is this column here called is email verified. And that is we're using the integer. Since SQLite, it doesn't, at least to my knowledge, I'm not sure if you're able to just explicitly just, use a type boolean to set it to true or false, but we have to do it this way. So we're using an integer with the mode of boolean, and we're setting it false by default. And then we're going to set that to true when we update this table after the user is indeed verified. So that is that one column we're adding, and then we are creating a whole new table to store the verification codes that are sent out to users. The first column is the ID, and that is set to auto increment. And then we're using a user's ID column to reference our users table, so that so we could have that connection and reference for which code belongs to which user. We also have the email here, so we could send, so we could have access, so we could send that information to the user. And also finally we have this expires at, and that is where we're going to set the timer for our code to expire in. It just takes an integer. We're using mode timestamp and not null. And again, I currently have it programmed to 5 minutes, but we're going to go through that next. Well, not next, but in a little bit. So once you have this updated schema in place, you want to do a migration. So you do db pn db generate. npn is an alias I have in place. It means pnpm. Um, and db migration is a command for one of the scripts I have. So these are all my database commands right here. So it's just going to do, it's going to generate that schema. It's going to do, generate a migration for the updated schema. I already did this, so nothing is going to happen. But once you guys make changes to the schema, it's going to inform you of those changes. And then after that, you want to do a db push to push that migration to your database. And then you will have in your database view, you will have all that information. You would have the users, the email verifications codes table, and then the updated field and our users table. So that is that for the schema. And then we also want to do is we want to update the file that contains our Lucia instance. By the way, anybody coming in from the last video, I updated this file name to be Lucia Auth rather than just Auth. So just keep that in mind. And here we are just adding, we are just returning the is email verified attribute in case we need it. And we are also stating that here in the type. So for those who don't know, this is needed because by default, Lucia does not expose these different attributes. It only exposes the ID from the users table. And to get access to those other columns and attributes, we have to do it this way. And what I mean by that is, let's see, we have a hook. We have a hook that once we validate the session, meaning like we log the user in, this function returns a user's object and a sessions object. And we are assigning that to our new locals called user and session. And then we could use this in our page, load that functions and different endpoints, form actions, etc. So now, let's see, let me go to my dashboard. Dashboard. So now we are able to access the locals and the user's locals in particular within this load function for the dashboard, which we use to kind of display the user's name. And we are also able to view the is email verified column that we had exposed. So yeah, if we did not specify that in the other file, we would only see the ID. So that is why we are doing this. Let me just bring this back to name. And yeah, so let's get on to the next steps. So for the next steps, we want to, let's see, also for those coming again, I just consolidated all the Zod schemas into one file called Auth Zod schema. So that is that right here. Let me, it's a bit big, so let me just quickly zoom out. So we have our registration schema, and we also have our users login schema. I just made it a lot simpler by just picking the, what is that? I'm sorry for the noise. There's like I assume a raccoon in my roof, but hopefully it's not too. It stops. It stops. So hopefully it doesn't continue. And yeah, so we are just picking the email and the password from this registration Zod schema, so we don't have to do like extra code to be able to have that validation for those fields. And then we created a new Zod schema for the verification code. And with that, we set a verification length of 8. And we're going to be using this constants again when we are generating the verification code. So that is the only new thing we're adding. You can just follow this file and view the updates. But the main new thing to get this email verification to work is the addition rather, of this verification code schema. So once that is done, all right, so now that we have that in place, we're going to go over to a file called auth-utils, which contains our utility functions for authentication. We have a couple of imports, but we're just going to be focusing on how they're being used. As I mentioned, we're using resend. So we have a resend instance that gets created here, and it just takes the API key. With that, let me actually go through on how to acquire that API key. You sign in, you create an account, and then you click API keys, you click create new API key. You put in the name that you want, so you could just be able to discern which is which. And if you have a domain, you add that. I forgot how this part works actually. I think if for other aspects, I'm still not too familiar with resend, but that's how you acquire API key. And then once you generate it, we'll go through the implementation in the code. So before we get to that, we have a couple of things. We have a constant that stores the name of our cookie that we're going to be using. Now, this cookie is when we register the user, we want to preserve their information, which is their user ID that got created, and also their email. We want to preserve that so we could send that to the email verification route. So we could display the user's name in the UI as we saw, so to inform them, and also use that ID to be able to delete their verification code from the verifications table. So that is the reason for this. We also have something related to it. We just have a type for the user verification data, again, which is just the ID and the email. For this function is, we already seen this from the last video, where this function just creates a user session via a cookie, so they could stay logged in. So we were doing this a couple of places in our code. So I just decided to package it up into a reusable function. So that's what it's doing. It creates the session, which creates the session in our database. And then with that information, we create a session cookie using that session's ID. And then we set that cookie so they could be able to log in, stay logged in, and log in. And then we have something similar to delete user session when they log out. So it just deletes that cookie session, and that's about it. And here, this is the new code these are just new functions for existing code, but this is actually new code for the purpose of this video. So we are in this function, we are generating a email verification code. It takes in a user ID and the user's email. So the first part is we are generating that random string, which is the verification code. And the first parameter it takes is the length of that string. And we are using that constant we had declared before, and we have it set the length to 8. The second parameter is the types of characters that's going to be in that string. Currently, we're only using numbers, but we could also use letters as well to be alphanumerical. So that is that, or you could just use plainly letters, whatever you want to do. And then from there, we have a transaction in place. Transactions allows you to run multiple database statements as one process. So that could be helpful for speed. But in this case, we want to, if there's an error that occurs while inserting a new verification code, the transaction will roll back, preventing the deletion of old verification codes. This maintains the state of the database. So essentially, when we generate a new verification code, we want to delete any any existing verification code, which would just be one in this case, for that user. Um, for example, is like say their verification code expired and they want to request a new verification code. So we want to delete that expired verification code, and then we then proceed to add a new verification code for that user in the table. So if this part were to fail, the insertion of the new verification code, the database would roll back, so we could still preserve the old code if we do need that for whatever reason. So that's that. And then, we're just deleting that code here, and then we're inserting the new verification codes row to our table with the user's information. We're using this create date function to have the expiration date for that verification code. And that create date function comes from this neat library that I mentioned from the last video called Oslo. It has a couple different like utility function for authentication. So it's really neat. Again, we have that expiration timer to be for 5 minutes. And then we are just returning the code at the end of the function. And then we have a function to send the verification code. So this will be after we generate the code, we send that code to the user's email. And again, this is all happening in the registration process. This function is also used when the user wants to send a new verification code in case the old one is expired. So for this, we're just using resend. We're deconstructing what's being returned from the send function, and just grabbing that error to be able to use it down here, which we'll get to. And we're just specifying the email information, such who it's coming from. In this case, it's just such a generic from. Who we're sending it to. We could send this to multiple people if you're not using the recent test version. Since we are using the test version, again, we could only send emails to the email that we're registered with. So the next one is just the subject, and then the body that contains the verification code that was generated from here. We pass that in as a parameter for this function. If there is an error, we want to issue that out to our console so the developers could see what the error is. Error in this case would be like if we try to send to an email to one that we're not registered with via resend, is going to say, hey, you can't do that since this is a test email. You would need to upgrade to, I guess, a production email to be able to send to other people. So that is that. And we just want to return success false. So we could handle that. And also error message that we would want to send to the user. The reason why we're not sending the error message that comes from resend itself is because it could contain, private information, such as your personal email that you might not want every user to see. So that's why we're only sending that resend error message or error object that contains the error message to the server, so only developers could see it. And then we have a more generic message for the user. And we are returning true if there was no error, and also a verification message, uh, a success verification message, I mean. So that is that. And then finally, the last function is when they receive that verification code from their email, this is the function that verifies whether or not that code is legit. So it takes a user ID and also the code that the user entered into. And we are first checking the database if there is a code for that user. And if there is not, then we're just going to return an error and with a proper message. And then we are checking if the code that they entered matches the code that's in the database for them. And if it's not, then we send out a error message. And finally, we are checking if the verification code has expired. We are also using the is with expiration date function from Oslo as well. It's the one that also created the the expiration date. So if it is expired, return false and return that proper messaging. So now is if everything is okay, delete the verification code from the database because we no longer need it. And then we return a success true with the proper message. So that is that. Now let's get on to the next steps. All right, so now that we went through all the utility functions that we'll need, which is just the last three, the generate, the send, and the verify. We're going to see how that is used in our code. And the first place that this is used is in our plus page.server for our register route. Let's see, is there anything new in the load function? There is not. And then we just have our register user action. And the new part is right here. So, oh, actually not right here, but right here. So we are first, after they have been successfully created, registered the user, we want to generate that verification code for them. So this is what this is doing right here. We grab that code and we are sending that code to their email now with this step. And then if there was an error when sending that code, we just want to inform the user as such. And finally, if there was no error, we want to pass that user's info to the next page. The next page being, what do you call it, the email verification page. So we could be able to access that user's info to, what do you call that, to verify the code that they received. So to do that, we're using a cookie. And cookies could only be strings. So that's why we're using a JSON that's stringified to stringify this user's data. And then we are setting that cookie. This one was actually incorrect. I was just using it from, what do you call that, one of my video attempts. I kind of left it as such, but what we want to do is set it to this. Awesome. So the reason why we don't want it to be just at the root of the application is for better security, if needed. I just felt that it was good. So we're saying that this cookie that we're setting, which is the pending verification user data, should only be accessible in the email verification route. So that's what that path is, specific path is for. And yet, if there was an error throughout all of this, we're just going to inform the user that there was an error. And if not, we are going to redirect them to the email verification route. So let's actually get there now. And there we are. So we're going to first check out the front end of the page. Here we have a, what do you call that? We're using Superforms to be able to validate the verification code. And we are using an alias for enhance because we're using enhance in this route. We have two form actions, one to verify the code and the other to send a new code if the code they had expired. So we want to be able to use enhance for both of those forms. That's why we have to create an alias for the other one, so we could still use enhance for the other, which we'll see in a bit. This is not, yeah, we set it to false. We don't want a tainted message. We're using, this is for front end validation. So that is validation is based on the Zod schema that we had, which is again, if we saw, we only want, we only want a verification code with the length of 8. So that's the simple verification we have for this. And once that gets processed through a server, this is what this unupdated function is. Then we want to issue a error message if there is. We're not going to do a success message, because if there's a success message, we're, well, there is no success message, because once, if they do validate properly, that code properly, then we're just redirecting them to the dashboard. So we only have an error message if the code was incorrect, or the other issues that we had specified. And then from here, we just have some basic HTML for the heading and the H2 that we saw. We have the form to verify that code, and it just has one input field and a submit button. And also, if you guys want, I do plan on making this anyway, possibly a video on how to use SvelteKit superforms, which is most of what we see here, to just have a lot better experience in validating forms. It's really awesome. I recommend it. So I might be making that video. We shall see. But yeah, that's the end of the first form to verify the code. And then we have the second form to send a new code. And here we are using the enhance function. When we get a result back from the server, if it's a failure, we just want to issue out a error message, and if it's a success, we want to issue out a success message. So a success message would be like, hey, while we send a new code to your email, please check it, so you can enter it in that page. And then the error message would be, what do you call it, whatever the error message might be. Like, say if we're trying to verify, which we should not get to that point, if we were trying to, what do you call that, send a new verification code to an email that is not valid via resend or whatever the case might be, then that's the type of error message would appear. So that is that, and let's get on to the next steps. So now we're going to be, actually, let me just pull it up right here. We're going to be going through the server for that email verification page. And in here, we have a function, a utility function, to be able to get the user data cookie. That's the one that we had sent to this route when a user registers. So we just create a function to be able to easily extract that in object form. So that's what that's doing there. And then from there, we are in the load function. We are getting that user data. If there's nothing there, we are returning back to the register page. And if there is, we are returning that user's email, so it could be displayed in the front end, and also our verification form data for the validation via superforms. And then the last two bits for this file rather, is the actions. And we have the verify code action. Again, we're getting the user data. If there's nothing there, we're redirecting to the register page, and we are validating whether or not that the verification code is legit. And if it's not, we're sending a error to the user. And if it is, we are then to, and again, this is just like if they entered like a length less or more than 8. So that's the validation we specified. So that's what this is handling. Now we are seeing if that verification code matches up in our database. So this is what that is. And if it doesn't, we're going to error out the appropriate message to the user so they can see in the front end. And if it's not, if it's valid, then we're just going to, what do you call that, delete that pending user verification cookie for that user's data, since we no longer need that, since the user is verified. And we are just updating our database to say, yes, now this user is indeed verified. We set that column to true, and then we create a session to log that user in. and redirect them to the dashboard. And then the final action is the send new code. So we're getting that user data again, redirecting if it's not to the register page, if it's not there. And here we are generating a verification code since the one that they had is most likely expired. And we're sending that code to their email. If there was an error, we'll let the user know. If not, we just return a message letting them know that the code has been sent to their email. And I believe that is about it. Let me just check if there was anything done in the login page. No, not really. Nothing related to the email verification. So yeah, that is about it. That wraps up this video. Thank you guys for tuning in. Hopefully I did a good job at explaining things. If not, please leave your questions in the comment and I will answer them. Until next time, we'll see you on the password reset video once I get that in place. Peace.